When I look at both the OMEGA Seamaster 300 and the Seamaster Diver 300, I get stuck in choosing which one is a better watch. They are both based on Omega's historical dive watch designs, come on both bracelet and strap options, and are reliable, everyday professional dive watches. You get the point. If you're considering purchasing one or the other, today I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison of my favorite versions of both of these awesome dive watches offered by Omega in stainless steel, and go through their specs and in the end ultimately give my thoughts on which one could be right for you. Anyways, both pieces are available in our shop at Carrot & Co., an authorized retailer for Omega located in Flushing, Queens, New York. And if you're new here and love watches, please consider subscribing to our channel for more content. Now, let's dive right in. If you're considering between these watches, one of the first things you might be asking is, how do they wear on the wrist? Well, side by side, both of these watches have very similar dimensions. The Diver 300 has a case dimension of 42 millimeters with a 13.5 millimeter thickness and a lug-to-lug of 49.5 millimeters, while the Seamaster 300 has a case dimension of 41 millimeters, 13.85 millimeters of thickness, and a lug-to-lug of 48 millimeters. Already on paper, the specs suggest that the Seamaster 300 would fit more wrist sizes due to its reduced case size, which I'll explain in a bit. Both fit quite similar though on my 6.4 inch wrist, despite my wrist not necessarily having the ideal size to handle either of these watches. Many of us, including myself, will immediately identify this version of the Seamaster Diver 300 as the quintessential James Bond style, although both Seamaster and other versions such as the Aquaterra have been used in other James Bond movies. The Diver 300 case features mostly brush polishing featured throughout the case with slight mixing of high polish on its twisted lugs, which help the case sit centered and comfortable on my wrist despite having a longer length. The twisting of the lugs with polished brush finish helps hide the length, especially when on the wrist, since light is reflected off different areas of the lugs. The overall design of the Diver 300 reflects what a modern Omega dive watch is, with its iconic conical helium escape valve at 10 o'clock, sloped crown guards, and thick scratch-proof ceramic bezel, which makes legibility great. The bracelet follows this exact 20mm size around the wrist with no taper and has slight accents of high polish on the edges of the two center links and a nice micro-adjustable folding clasp for adjustment on the fly, allowing up to 6 positions of additional fit and also a diver's extension. Now, since the Seamaster 300 takes inspiration from Omega's early 1957 dive watch, it has that slim, full-lumen aluminum bezel, printed dial aesthetic, dome sapphire crystal, pointy lugs, and crown guardless case with a new conical screw-down crown. This results in a beautiful vintage modern done so right, and the case sharper and angular with the case curving slightly down for a centered wrist placement. On the wrist, it has a 48mm lug-to-lug, and the bracelet is able to fall straight down, making wearing it on the bracelet a much better experience for slimmer wrists, just like my own 6.4 inch wrist. The lugs also feature high polish facing the wearer and brush finishing following the sides, and this is reflected into the tapered bracelet, which starts at 21mm from the case and tapers down to a wonderful 16mm folding clasp with micro adjustments on the fly, allowing up to additional 3 positions of fit. There's no diver extension here, but overall in the fit department, I'd say the design of the Seamaster 300 case allows for a more straightforward universal fit due to its vintage-inspired case, reduced case size, taper bracelet. Although the Diver 300 has a more flat and wide presence on the wrist with its 13.5mm thickness, slightly thinner, the Seamaster 300 doesn't come off as a thick watch in general, since the previous generation had about 14.5mm of thickness. So this is already a welcome slimming down of this exact case. To me, the Diver 300 has a more tool watch feeling to it due to its being much more brush finish than high finish and a thicker bracelet links, while the Seamaster 300 feels and wears like a luxury tool watch with its uses of more high finish around the case and bracelet and a nice tapering down on the wrist. Although I wouldn't stop you from wearing a dive watch with this suit, the Seamaster 300 to me would complement the undertones of his suit better than the striking design of the Diver 300. Finally, you also have to consider that the Diver 300 has a 20mm lug width, which is a much more commonly used lug width size if you're looking to switch it out on a strap, while the Seamaster 300 has that uncommon odd number 21mm lug width, giving some more challenges when looking for strap options out there. Luckily, Omega's website does have options for both watches, but in general, a 20mm lug width is a little bit more common size if you venture outside of Omega's own native straps. In the dial department, both of these Seamasters execute their dials in their own design language extremely well. I chose to show you the great white version of the Diver 300 because to me that is the best dial version due to its high legibility with its stark contrast. But if you like the other dial versions and colors, you can apply the same ideas here. The great white dial is a Colgate white ceramic laser engraved with the iconic Seamaster wave sitting underneath a domed sapphire crystal with anti-reflective treatment on both sides, inside and outside surface. On the outside of the dial are black printed lines for every minute. The hour markers sit comfortably above the dial in black polished furniture filled with a healthy dosage of superluminova. The classic skeletonized handset is also blackened and contrasted with superluminova, giving great legibility in either daytime or nighttime, and the seconds hand has that circular lollipop design sitting right underneath a red syringe tip. The dial also contains a total of 7 lines of text, 007, from the OMEGA Seamaster Professional up top, a faint ceramic chemical compound text, the coaxial Master Chronometer, and depth rating underneath. There's also a date window sitting squarely at 6 o'clock, giving the watch a symmetrical layout which is pleasing to look at. Factor the dial with the black polished ceramic look, and the white dial just really pops. It has that stark contrast with slight pops of color, such as the classic red Seamaster text and red tips seconds hand. This is a no-joke modern professional dive watch. Now on the Seamaster 300, things are much more subtle. At a glance, it appears to just be a black dial with some printed text. However, like early dive watches from the 50s, black dials were chosen to also increase contrast and legibility. Omega went a step further with this new Seamaster 300 by executing a sandwich dial, where all the hour markers are on a separate dial disc just underneath the central black dial, and only anti-reflective treatment on the inner surface of the sapphire crystal. This is like the reverse effect of adding applied indices, but instead of giving depth of height, you're actually giving it depth below. Get it? The outside of the dial also has thin white lines for the minute track, sandwich dial sharp angular hour markers almost like a shark's teeth with cutouts of 12, 3, 6, and 9. Classic broad arrow handset with vintage superluminova, and a classic lollipop seconds hand ticking across the dial. The minute hand is also long and slender that touches the outside of the minute track when looking through that sweet dome sapphire crystal, and the dial text here is very minimal. It's an OMEGA Seamaster 300. And that's all you need to know. No depth rating, no coaxial text, no master chronometer, even though it has all the same functional feats as the Diver 300. Now side by side, the dial of the great white Diver 300 sits like a luxury yacht above the sea with its beautiful laser engraved wave dial in ceramic. But the detail of the Seamaster 300 is like a submarine underwater and not easily seen if you aren't looking. Both dial designs result in fantastic legibility and become more of an apple and oranges conversation, since it's like the polar opposite of applied indices versus a sandwich dial, both having dual lume emission on both designs. The comparison of the dial and appearance of the face really becomes a subjective battle, as it really depends on which you like. Do you like the modern approach or the vintage modern approach? And personally, I can't tell you objectively which one is better because I genuinely love both dials, so let's just move on to the next comparison. Both of these watches have a 120-click unidirectional bezel, Diver 300 in a scallop edge ceramic, while the Seamaster 300 in a coin edge, hardened, oxalic, anodized aluminum that is fully lumed. This is a tongue twister. Omega even states that the special aluminum bezel is 2 times harder than the standard aluminum, so even though it doesn't have the same scratch-resistant properties or level of the ceramic, it will still hold up extremely well over time. But let's do a bezel click test to see how they both sound and feel. It's a nice click, nice and tight, snug. Now let's try out the Seamaster 300. Also nice and snug, It has a little bit of louder noise, I guess due to it using aluminum, but different materials. But yeah, both sound really great. When comparing both of the bezels, I personally find it easier to grip the Seamaster 300 because it's a coin edge grip, so it's much easier to catch. Because several times when I would use my hands on the Diver 300, if my hands were a little bit wet, I couldn't really grasp the scallop edge of the Diver 300 as easily. For the Diver 300, sometimes you also have to rotate from the top of the watch as opposed to grasping the sides. But anyways, functionally, they both have an ISO rated and tested 300-meter water resistance, both capable of handling a ton of water resistance that most of us will barely even use a third of its capability, with sapphire crystal casebacks displaying its master chronometer movements, something that is commonly not seen on professional dive watches. First, the Diver 300 has the Master Chronometer certified movement caliber 8800, equipping the watch with a 55-hour power reserve automatic movement with beautiful Geneva waves. This caliber 8800 also has a date window. To me, the date window is one of the most useful complications on a watch, as most people I know check the watch first for the date and then the time. Now on the Seamaster 300, it also has a Master Chronometer certified movement, this time the caliber 8912, equipping the watch with a 60-hour power reserve, automatic movement, also with beautiful Geneva waves. Instead of a date window, the caliber 8912 is dateless, but it has one of my personal favorite functions, the easy time zone function or jumping hour. Now the jumping hour adjustment is usually seen on GMT watches that allow you to adjust only the hour hand independently from the current minute, letting you adjust time when traveling without stopping the minute hand. And you know, some people might think this is not necessary since it's a time-only watch, but trust me, there's something so satisfying when you're using a jumping hour or a GMT hand when you're traveling with your watch through different time zones. Now, both of these movements are Master Chronometer certified, approved by METUS, which is a separate independent agency that rates these movements. Master Chronometer movements pass several additional tests ahead of COSC certified, which also allow these movements to both have superior precision of 0 to +5 seconds per day, even guaranteeing the precision when in lower power reserve, when some traditional watches will lose precision when it has low power reserve. They both have anti-magnetic resistance to 15,000 Gauss or an MRI machine, which is insane, guaranteed water resistance, additional durability, less servicing intervals with its free-sprung silicone hairsprings, shock resistance, guaranteed power reserve, and 2 barrels mounted together to give it 55 hours of power reserve. The question here really comes down to, do you like having the date window or not? Because functionally, both of these movements do the same thing at a super over-engineered level. Although the Seamaster 300 has 60 hours of power reserve versus the Diver 300 with 55 hours of power reserve, I don't believe that the additional 5 hours will actually make a huge difference in the enjoyment of the functionality of either watches. And there's something so satisfying about having a purpose-driven instrument that is completely over-engineered, so you know that whether you choose the Diver 300 or the Seamaster 300, that its functionality and its looks will last a lifetime. You never have to worry if your watch is running slow. You never have to worry if your watch will get magnetized. It's always going to keep great time, and it's going to do it at a super high level. Now, the Diver 300 weighs in at a price of $5,200 on its bracelet or $4,900 on the rubber strap at the time of this video. And the Seamaster 300 comes in at a price of $6,500 on bracelet or $6,150 on a leather strap. Both versions come in an assortment of different colors and materials, with the Diver 300 having more options since it did release several years earlier in 2018. There's also a new James Bond No Time to Die version in titanium that is using this exact case, for example. So which one is right for you? If you want something that feels modern, Omega with stark contrast and design, I'd say hands down go for the Diver 300. You won't be disappointed with its ability to be used as a versatile everyday watch with high functionality. Its price point punches way above what it is offering, especially when you compare it to dive watches above $10,000. So high value offering in the $5,000 range, modern design, it has a date which is great for every day, incredibly robust and reliable. Now if you want something that is more subtle, understated, with a sandwich or cleaner dial, definitely go for the Seamaster 300. The combination of its details makes it a fan favorite that could easily be dressed up or dressed down casually. The taper bracelet makes the watch a more universally wearable size, and even with its bump in price to the $6,000 range, it is still delivering super high value for the money. Let me know in the comments which one you'd choose, and I'll be honest, I am definitely leaning towards the Seamaster 300 since, as I mentioned, I like watches with more subtle vintage modern designs. Even though I'm not a huge fan of vintage superluminova, it doesn't ruin the experience for me because for the example of this watch, a watch from the 50s, it's really fitting for the time period of what this is supposed to represent. It's easily a go anywhere, do anything sports watch that can easily be dressed up and down. And come on, jumping hour, anti-reflective coating only on the inner surface, coin edge grip, that just blew it over the edge for me. Thank you so much for watching this video today on 2 heavy hitter dive watches from Omega. Please subscribe to this channel if you love watches and like this video if you enjoyed this format of comparisons. Our store, Carrot & Co, is one of the largest Omega authorized retailers for over 20 years, located in Flushing, New York. If you have any questions regarding either of these items, please contact us and we'd be happy to help. It's been a minute and I can't wait to see you all next time. Bye bye.